Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babylon Eyes match preview with myself and Sloth. Everton at home in what could be Julian Lopetegui's last game in charge, if reports are to be true about him needing a convincing win and a convincing performance to keep his job against Everton. So a win might not even be enough, Sloth, but I don't believe that. I think if we do lose and we lose in a manner, in the same manner, in the same vein that we've been performing so far, I feel like he could be under massive, massive pressure. But we're going to break down what the potential risks are from Everton and what threats they pose on their side, how we can counter that, where we can look to exploit them as well, because they haven't been performing particularly well this season, along with West Ham. So, yeah, if you enjoy it, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. And first and foremost, Sloth, let's go through the stats and expected stats so far this season, because it paints a nice picture for where both teams currently sit in the Premier League. So, West Ham, 2 more points than Everton with 11 compared to their 9. We've scored 3 more goals than them with 13 compared to their 10. However, we've conceded 19 goals, which is the third worst in the division. And Everton hasn't been much better, to be honest, with 17. And the positions there pretty similar. We're 14th and they're 16th. Does that paint the picture for you, Sloth, as to, how subpar both teams have been so far this season?
Pretty much. I think with Everton, obviously, I don't want to be too disrespectful here, but I think that they kind of expected to struggle again after a very tough few months and prior season. I don't think anyone really looked at the business they did, and especially with the takeover business surrounding the club. I don't think anyone expected them to really kick on massively. I do think they've made a couple of very smart moves, like particularly in Dye. I think he's a great footballer, but they look like a very different side to what I associate a Sean Dyche side to be. And I know that at the moment there's a lot of differing opinions about what they should do with the manager and whether they should stick by Sean Dyche, particularly when it comes to the lineups. But it's one of those things where I think he would have just been told to keep us in the Premier League and make sure we survive, because I think luckily this season and the past couple of seasons where there's been this gap between the newly promoted sides or sides who are at the bottom, there's a gap opening up in quality, and I think that it's very clear there's generally 3 sides that will perform really poorly in the league.
I
think they've just got enough about them to scrape by and separate themselves from that pile.
Yeah, I agree. I would expect them to stay up. I'd expect West Ham to stay up as well, but you never know in the Premier League what's going to happen. And, Everton had a really, really bad start to the season. I think they lost their opening 4 games. They did have some tough fixtures in that, but since then, I think they actually went unbeaten up until the point where they played Southampton last week and lost 1-0. Again, they should have won that game, to be honest, looking at the chances they had and the amount of chances they squandered in that match. So if you're looking at the positives from Everton, they haven't been winning every game. They've picked up a few draws, but they were unbeaten after their opening 4 games in the Premier League. So definitely signs of improvement for Everton, but as you say, it's I feel like they'll be in and around the lower half of the table this season, based on what we've seen so far under Sean Dyche and the squad that they currently have. But I think Everton, as we look at the expected stats, they're kind of on par for where they should be, and West Ham are in a similar position as well. So our expected points is 11.12 versus our actual 11. Everton are slightly underperforming, so they should be on 10.29 compared to their 9. Expected goals scored for West Ham, 15.98, 12.37 for Everton. Expected goals conceded, ours is actually worse than the 19 we've conceded at 20.49. And Everton's is pretty much the same at 17.98. And expected position for Everton, 16th is where they currently sit. And for West Ham, it's 15th, which is 1 place below where we currently sit. So I'd say both teams are pretty much on par with the actual data, which does suggest that both teams have underperformed and are realistically where they should be in the league. How do you see us going into this one, Sloth, looking at putting your West Ham cap back on, because it's a massive game. We've got some key players out. Obviously, the news that Kudus' suspension as well has been extended. So that's a massive blow, not just for this game, but for the games past that as well. what's the message from Lopetegui with all of the noise around him at the moment? What does he do? Because the performance against Forest was so stale, it was so poor, and that was where we shifted to a back three. What do you think his approach is, and what is he saying to those players inside the dressing room to make sure that we get a result in this game?
I think you've got to stick a rocket up their arse. There's no other way of putting it. It's the performance against Forest was not just poor; it was quite frankly embarrassing. And I don't just mean that from a fan perspective. I think when you look at just how disjointed they were on the pitch, the idea that the manager has coached these players and that's how they perform reflects really badly on him. And I think, he's got to be looking at it and thinking, not only have you let me down, I'm letting myself down. So I need to make a change. And personally, I think we'll go to a sort of 4-3-3. I really kind of can't see what happens, because we are sort of beginning to reflect last season, where I think out of form players just don't really get dropped. And some of the players are so out of form that I'm expecting them to be dropped when they're selected, or, back for the almost full 90 minutes. I'm sat scratching my head. So I honestly, like, what happens is going to be totally out of the blue for me. I've got no expectations going into it that he's going to select one side in particular.
Yeah, it's extremely tough to know how this is going to swing, because, as you say, I do expect him to go to the back four again, just because of how flat we were with that back three last week. Obviously, Edson Alvarez as well, he's going to be missing because of his suspension. Lucas Paqueta will be available because he's only got 4 yellow cards, so if he picks up one more, he will be out. So we have quite a few players who will be missing from the game. So again, it's going to be interesting to see what Lopetegui does with the lineup, given that the performance was so poor against Forest last weekend. But looking at an overview of both teams and the stats so far, and just painting the picture a little bit more in detail, just so you're aware. So Everton have the 7th worst defensive record in the Premier League so far this season, based on actual data and expected data. They have the 5th worst attacking record as well. Just 10 goals scored is the 5th lowest in the Premier League. And they are only 18th for expected goals scored in the Premier League this season. So they're definitely one of the weaker teams in terms of creating good quality chances. As you can see, they're only averaging 1 goal per game, averaging 1.7 goals conceded per game. They average around 40% possession in the Premier League so far this season, so similar to what we saw with Forest last week. And they've mainly operated in that 4-2-3-1 structure that Sean Dyche likes to play. And again, it's kind of like a 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1 that he plays recently McNeil playing inside alongside Calvert-Lewin. So they do possess danger. They have the quality to obviously score goals. As we've said before, Calvert-Lewin is a fantastic player on his day, as we've said many times in many previews when we've played Everton. Obviously, Beto's scoring, should have scored again against Southampton. So he'll be looking to, if needs be, coming off the bench and making an impact. And they do have some quality, like you say, with Ndiaye. I felt he was a very good signing for them, and he's been good. He's been one of the standout players for Everton. I just think they lack I don't know, there's just something about it that just lacks something for Everton. And, I feel like West Ham have those players. It's not clicked this season. I just feel like Everton lack those star players, those players that can win a game for you. And that's why they've probably struggled over the last few seasons. They haven't really had that player. It's been players like McNeil who have stepped up in moments, with a 3 or 4 game spell, Calvert-Lewin contributing with important goals. They haven't really had a consistent performer like a Jared Bowen, like a Mo Kudus. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how both teams line up for this, but I would expect us to go with a 4-3-3 again. I'd expect Everton to continue doing what they're doing. Are you surprised that a player that we were linked with in the summer slot, O'Reilly, the centre-back, hasn't been playing for Everton? Because when we were on our channel saying that would probably be a decent signing for us. He hasn't really played in an Everton shirt, and doesn't look like Sean Dyche is really trusting him to go into that back four. Why do you think that is?
I can only really imagine that there's fit issues there. He really impressed me when he was at Lyon, and I don't know whether it's just maybe he's been adjudged to be lacking in sort of technical areas. Maybe he's not adapting to Dyche's game plan, but you speak to Everton fans and it doesn't really sound like they feel that he has much of a game plan at the moment. I don't really know what's going on there. It's maybe he just needs a bit of time to reach a point or be adjudged to have be fully fit. But for me, it's a bit of a head scratcher, because particularly when you look at how many goals they're conceding, you would maybe think that they're going to make a change at some point and they would look to bring him in. Again, I'm a very big fan of him, and I think that he will be one of those players who definitely comes good this season for them. I just think, going back to what you were saying before, they lack a real bit of bite. And they had that when Onana was in the midfield, and I think they haven't really replaced that with any sort of outstanding quality anywhere. As I mentioned, and is a very good player, but I think the fact that you haven't got someone in that side, and you're going to get at least a 7 out of 10 performance, and that also kind of applies to us. It's just something that kind of puts you on the back foot, and particularly when players like Branthwaite aren't in the side. It's something that they really look a different opposition when he is fit and ready. That defense looked so much more solid and a lot more confident. Now I think it's a case of, not that they're playing individually, but there's not that same commanding presence and someone to really lead that defense. So I'm kind of surprised that's why O'Brien's not been given a chance. I would maybe think that, particularly a young lad going out to France, going out to Lyon, and playing and commanding in the way that he did, for me, would be the sort of player you'd want when you're at the wrong end of the table, and someone who's going to step up. They've got a bit of mental reserve to try and apply themselves. Lyon were in a relegation battle for a large part of the last season, and it's kind of surprising to me that they haven't really utilised him. But I think as long as we can try and focus on utilising the assets we have, how many times have we said this? If we can utilise the players that we do have, I think we can definitely cause a lot of problems for Everton, and hopefully, while they're in this sort of spell of not underperforming, but I think they just look like they're going to concede and potentially not have enough to score up top. And West Ham could very well be in that same situation. I think, particularly if someone like Antonio or Fulkrug are out for a long spell of time, then alarm bells at the club have to be ringing, because you're then playing Bowen up top and you're nullifying that right hand side.
Yeah,
but it's something that I think both sides need to address in the transfer market. And I know it's wild saying that in November when we've still got a lot of football to play before that opens, but I think that's the headspace that both clubs need to be in. How can we address this season? How can we try and get it kind of where we want it to be?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, we said before when we came back from the previous international break, how many points and what we would consider successful in that period. Well, we managed to get the win against Man United somehow, but we've lost to Spurs, we've lost to Forest. This is a big game now before the next international break for West Ham. And, we looked at Everton's stats just there. Looking at West Ham's, it doesn't look much better either. We have the third worst defensive record in the Premier League so far. We have the fifth worst expected defensive record in the Premier League with 20.49 expected goals against. We are 13th for expected goals scored, so again subpar in terms of the averages. We're only averaging 1.3 goals per game. We're averaging 1.9 goals conceded per game, which is mental. And that was kind of that last point there, Sof, I wanted to ask you a question around. You know, we're only averaging around 45% possession in the Premier League so far. I granted we've played some difficult opposition, you know, Chelsea, City, Spurs, United. These games have been tough, but there's also been games where we'd probably want to dominate possession a little bit more. And you know, with Lopetegui coming in, that was kind of one of the key points that we mentioned. Is he's someone that likes to control games, and that possession is controlled possession, and it's sustainable. At the moment, whenever we do have possession of the ball, it seems very lackluster. It lacks intent behind it. And even, you know, looking at the averages, we're below 50%. We're at around 45%, which is quite low. So what do you put that down to? Is that stylistic? Is that, again, the players need to take some responsibility for that, or does it rest with Lopetegui at the moment?
The players definitely need to take some responsibility for it. I think, you know, we've sat here this season and criticised players like Paqueta consistently, and when you are that lackluster, I'm talking about him because he is so lackluster in possession and he gives away possession so much that it creates the chances for the opposition that hurt you. And look, I don't want to sound like a stuck record, but when you have so little possession and so much of that possession that you do have is made up of, quite frankly, possession for possession's sake. It's useless possession where we're just basically passing it around the back four or the back five, and we're not going anywhere with it. We're not progressing the ball forward. And I'm not saying that that's what you always have to do. You know, you should always be passing it forward. You don't. But there comes a point when you realise, watching West Ham at the moment, there's such a disjoint between when people press, when people work to retain possession, and the link up between the starting 11 and the ideology that he's trying to put in place, where perhaps we look to progress the ball, we look to use our wings more, our wing backs more, and we utilize the pace we have by playing into space. There doesn't seem to be a plan where you go, actually, you know what, we're doing this and it's going well. Is
that the key point there? There isn't a plan. Do you I mean, what is the plan? Because we were told this plan at the beginning of the season, in pre-season, of how he wants to play and how Lopetegui will be tactically flexible to adjust to different scenarios. At the moment, it seems like it's very reactive to things. It's not being flexible for showcasing our, you know, tactical nuances. It's almost like we're forced to play our hand, and you know, we have to make 3 subs against Man United at halftime because it isn't working. We have to make 2 subs away at Forest because it isn't working. It's not like we're adjusting to certain scenarios. It's more of a reaction, and that's where I have a big problem with this. And that's where, going into this Everton game, I'm just completely unsure what Lopetegui's going to do now, and I've lost faith in what the process is and what he's trying to implement, just because it's been chopping and changing so much and it's been reactive. What are your thoughts on that stuff? Because I haven't seen Lopetegui be tactically flexible and it work really. It's been pretty poor throughout the entirety of this season.
I think one of the key issues that we are looking at with West Ham is that there's a reliance on players who are underperforming, and players who are underperforming and aren't necessarily also workhorses. You know, I think that's the contrast that we've seen with Kudus. You know, he works hard. He may give the ball away quite a lot. And particularly last season, you know, he gets tackled quite a lot, or he will dribble and produce outstanding carrying numbers. However, he will lose possession as well because he will try and take on players. With Paqueta and what he's doing at the moment in his poor form, he's just giving the ball away and he's not working hard to get back. If you had players who were constantly trying to chase possession, and you know, we talked about it when James Ward-Prowse was at Southampton, and you know, he carries a lot. He covers a lot of distance, and there's a difference between doing that and like possession for possession's sake. There's a difference between covering a lot of distance and actually getting stuff done, and just carrying distance because you're a bit of a headless chicken and you're trying to chase down things and it's not really working. There's no coordination to the press. So I think there's a real clash of ideologies with the coach and with the players. And that's a big worry for me. I think when Kudus does eventually come back, we're very lucky that it's going to be for the Wolves game and the Leicester game, and I think that we should be looking at that and going, this is, you owe it to the fans. You've got to throw yourself on here and really do something. But with someone like Paqueta, I just don't see any attitude or application to do that. And I think that's an issue across the side. Someone like Alvarez, where he's diving in and just doing something stupid, instead of actually assessing what's happening around you and looking around and saying, actually, we've got a lot of players there, you're just making a stupid decision.
Yeah.
And there needs to be communication. Is something we've said before. There needs to be communication across the 11, and there also needs to be accountability. And I think if the majority of the side work hard and apply themselves, we should be able to get results. But it's when you see players half-heartedly walking back and not putting in the effort that West Ham fans in particular will lose it. They will not.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think there has to be both aspects there. Like Lopetegui's clearly getting it wrong, but also, as you mentioned, the players have to take some responsibility on the pitch. There's no excuse for walking on a football pitch or not tracking back or not tracking your runners, doing the basics, the fundamentals of football. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very interesting game. I don't think it's going to be one for the neutrals to get massively excited about, to be honest. I don't think it's going to be full of, incredible, just passages play and, there's all this tactical brilliance. It's not going to be one of those, but it's a massively important game for both clubs, in particular Lopetegui, and how his future could shape up at West Ham if his West Ham future is still intact before the end of that game. How do you see us lining up, Sloth, before we get into our predictions? I think, obviously Areola missed last week because he was out and he had a knock, but Fabianski played anyway before that. Do you expect Fabianski to stay in goal for this one if Areola is fit?
If Areola's fit, to be honest, I probably still see Fabianski coming back, keeping the spot. But the problem is you have both keepers who are capable of making a fantastic save and then also just doing something ridiculously stupid or letting goals that really, a top keeper doesn't let in. So, but I think Fabianski will keep his place, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that'll be it. And if we do go back to a back four, we'll probably see the same back four that we've seen. So Mavropanos will probably come out. The midfield three, I guess the only choice you really have is, we've got 4 players that can play in there with Alvarez being out suspended. So who would your midfield three be? For me, I expect it to be Guido, Paqueta, Souček as the midfield three, and Soler to drop to the bench or stay on the bench.
I think that'll be it. I would. Again, I think that there needs to be consequences for poor performance. I expect it to be Paqueta who plays. If it was my job on the line, I'd literally be going, I can't trust you. And you can maybe come on for the last 20 if we're in a good position, because I think he's hindering us more than helping us at the moment. I just kind of hope he looks at the youth players and Orford in particular. We've been talking about him as someone to potentially come in, and
be very surprised if we see him.
And that's part of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think when we want someone who is athletic, mobile, and we know can be that sort of defensive anchor, he can do that. But I just think there doesn't appear to be a consequence for poor performance or underperforming, and I just can't see it changing from Guido, Souček, and Paqueta. I'd love him to prove me wrong, I really would, but I just
I think it'll be the same. I think it'll be the same as well. I don't think it'll change. I don't think he trusts Soler in the midfield either, and to be honest, his performances haven't been trustworthy. So yeah, I think that will be the midfield three as well.
If it gets to say December and he's still on the fringes, can you see us trying to cancel the loan?
It wouldn't surprise me if there's an alternative in January that we can go and get. I reckon we probably would, yeah, if there's something in the contract that we can do there, because it just hasn't been performing in a West Ham shirt up to date. So yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. And then I guess that leaves the front three of, I guess, Somerville on the left, Bowen on the right. Would you play Antonio or Ings as striker? That's the only last question really in that lineup.
Look, it's going to be Antonio, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm struggling to see where the goals come from, and I don't just mean that in terms of, I don't just mean that in terms of one goal. I mean that in terms of multiples. I've said it so many times. But when your striker's best season total for the Premier League is 10, and Antonio, that is, it doesn't fill me with confidence, and I think that Ings doesn't look fancy. Yeah, fair enough. He doesn't suit our system, but can you really keep scraping by on Antonio when he's basically having diminishing returns per game? It feels like now.
Yeah.
But I expect him to start. I don't expect him to do. But again, I'd happily be sat here in a couple of days' time looking stupid, stupider than I already do, and prove me wrong.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be the same. I think Antonio will lead the line, and that'll probably be the team, unless there's any injuries or Lopetegui does a surprise for us or keeps with the back three. But I don't think he will do that, given that we're at home to Everton, and the performance was just so dire against Forest. So, score prediction, Slough, for me, I think I've predicted a win pretty much every time, and I need to stop doing that because it's not happening. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. I think it'll be a really boring game. 2 scrappy goals. It could be 1-0 either way, but I'll go 1-1 to be a little bit more positive than a 1-0 defeat. What are you thinking for this one?
I'm going to go 2-1 to West Ham. What I would say is I would not be surprised if it gets ugly at some point, if the atmosphere goes really sour. If we go behind, I think that could get a bit nasty. But I'm not expecting a thriller, which is weird when both sides concede so much. But
I think they're just both so poor in front of goal as well that it cancels each other out. So that I agree. I think it will be a very scrappy game. It's not going to be one for the neutrals to be watching, especially on Saturday with the other options available. But I think we'll see what Lopetegui does. Obviously, massive pressure is building in the press and behind the scenes of what's currently going on, because it hasn't been good enough and we need to do better, and we should be in a better position in the Premier League this far into the season, and having played this many games under Lopetegui now, we should start to see patterns of evolution, but we're not. We're actually seeing patterns of regression. So let us know down below in the comments what your kind of score predictions are for this one. Any Everton fans watching, let us know your score predictions as well. Are you confident in your team? Because we certainly aren't confident in our team. But leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel for more content. And Slough, until the next one.
Come on, you irons.